What's up, everyone? This is Ryan here, and you are watching episode 19 of my Android Developer Live Q&A. Basically, today what I thought I'd do is, instead of giving you like a 10 to often 30-minute lesson in the beginning and kind of getting to questions towards the end, I thought, hey, let's just go ahead and dive pretty much straight into questions. So that's what I'll be focusing on for today. Before we begin, just a couple of things. I don't have any major announcements, so nothing there. Of course, my room database tutorial, which includes view model, live data, and all kinds of fun stuff, is of course live on the channel. So if you're curious about Android architecture components and room database and how those things fit into a functioning application, then you might want to go and check that thing out. And before we proceed, I would just like to thank the following people on Patreon for supporting the channel and helping me out. So we have Tony Jones Jr., Trevor Halvorsen, Bassam Halal, Nanotech, Shadow, Mr. Bidwell, Sushil Chanda, and Alad Stavi. So if you're a person who has even $1 or $2 or $5 to spare and you appreciate what I do, then please do consider supporting me on Patreon. The link should be down below. And that is it for the commercial for today. So if you're new to the channel, basically what I do is I just answer general questions about Android. I am myself basically an intermediate developer. I've built a fair number of applications, about, I would say, 4 medium to large scale applications and upwards of 12 smaller scale applications. I've worked with Android architecture components, Realm database, a little bit of retrofit, lots of UI stuff. Just I've got a good general understanding of the Android platform, and if I can't answer your questions sort of 100%, I can often point you in the right direction. So anyways, let's see here. So we have a question about testing rules, and I'm not entirely sure what you mean. So is there a way to mock testing rules? So perhaps this is something I'm not 100% clear on, but for example, if I open up in my Postrainer repository, by the way, I have a whole bunch of open source repositories that you can check out, and they're sort of medium to large scale applications. Postrainer is clean architecture. I've got the room sample up, RecyclerView, all kinds of different stuff there. So the question is about a way to mock rules, and I don't really understand why you would need to do that, and I don't think I can answer your question here, but let's see here. I believe what you're asking is, where the hell is my test package? So there are different rules you can use when you're executing your unit tests. Like for example, I'm using the Makoto JUnit runner, and it appears that you're asking, can you mock these rules? And I'm not aware if you can do that or why you would want to, unfortunately, but yep. Okay, so incorrect rules in the Firebase console. Okay, so I really don't understand what you're asking here by rules. Are you specifically saying like which like test rules you're running the thing with? Because like when we're doing unit tests, we're basically testing the behavior of the fake database source. Like the thing is, like if you're looking at the old, yeah, I'm not really grasping like the way that I execute my unit tests is here's the thing, like you don't actually want to be testing sort of the third-party API, which is something that you don't really have a huge amount of control over. So unfortunately, I don't think I can help you with that. We've got a question about data binding. So let's see here. So basically data binding, I'm actually going to, let's see here. I don't have a repository sort of open and ready with data binding, but let's see here. So let's go to, that'd be Android architecture blueprints. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to point you to a repository which should answer some of your questions about data binding, and I'll just briefly explain what it is. So basically, let's see if I can let me just pull up the code here. Oh yeah, I got lots of seagulls screaming outside today. Where are we here? Okay, so I'm not exactly an expert in data binding, but what you're going to want to do is, let's see. So data binding versus stuff like find view by ID is the question. So the important thing to know is that, so for example, like in the end, these things both kind of do the same. Like in a sense, you are just binding your views to the data. And the thing is, if you do it by find view by ID, what you can run into is a huge amount of sort of boilerplate code that you need to write. And man, I want to shoot that seagull. My apologies. Anyways, so basically, what I'm going to do is just really just point you to a library where you can check it out, because I haven't actually implemented data binding myself, but the library you're going to want to check out, or sorry, the repository you're going to want to check out is just here. I'll just paste a link into the comments section and I'll talk about it briefly. So the thing about data binding is, like, do you need it? No. Would you want to use it? It can really cut down on a lot of the boilerplate code, and it is something you kind of generally would want to learn. So I can't give you like a real great answer on that because I haven't actually implemented it myself. And when I haven't implemented something myself, I'm not really comfortable answering it. But in this particular case, you don't need data binding. It's probably going to cut down on a lot of the find view by ID boilerplate kind of code that you need to write. And also, if you're using model view model architecture, you're probably going to want to implement it because it sort of follows that pattern well. I know that's not a great answer, but unfortunately you happen to pick the one thing that I was, as far as architecture components and that stuff, that I have not yet implemented. I'm actually working on implementing that in the Room Demo 2017. So anyways, let's see if we can get a question I can actually answer. Oh, absolutely. We can do that one. So let's, awesome. Clean architecture problem. So this question is from Aman. And the question is, and by the way, you can call me Ryan. You don't have to call me wise ass or anything like that, or sir, or anything. So the question was, do I have a repo which follows clean architecture principles? And the question is absolutely. Down below in the description box, you're going to find a link to a repository called PosTrainer. And PosTrainer is an application which uses clean architecture and MVP. Now, it's something that I'm constantly working on, but let's just really briefly go over the repository, and I'll sort of talk you through how it works sort of in an MVP format. And before we do that, I'm just going to pull up the architecture diagram for the application, which is right here. Oh, hold on a sec. This happens like 3 times a day, and I kind of get a kick out of this. Piss off. Attack of the birds. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. There's a seagull that just likes to land on my outside window and make a whole bunch of noise during my stream, so I like to scare him away. Anyways, let's talk about clean architecture. Attack of the birds again. So basically this is a rough architecture diagram for Pos Trainer, and the way that it's set up is, of course we have our application class, which I like to think of as the big container of the entire application. And then within that we have an activity, and I like to treat activities also as containers for the rest of the MVP components. And what I mean by that is if I pull up Pos Trainer and we open up an activity, let's go ahead to main, and if you want to open up the repo and follow along, you're free to do so. So for example, I'm opening up alarm list activity, and as you can see, the activity is very barren. It really only has onCreate in here and a fragment manager, so that's basically it. So what I basically do is the activity is a container. I use fragments as my views, so all of my user interface code and that kind of thing goes in there. I use my presenters, and they are kept free of sort of any kind of external library except for RxJava, which is the way that I communicate to the different layers. So the presenter is going to be talking to these things called use cases. And if you're not familiar with clean architecture, this is basically the part that gets added in, which might sort of make it distinguishable between, say, just model view presenter or something like that. So what happens is the presenter sort of talks to these use cases, and then the use cases talk to the service layer. So what does that end up looking like within the application? Let's pull up, I'll just briefly talk about the fragment. The fragment, it just contains all of the view logic, so binding all of the binding all of the views and the widgets and so forth. And then it gets injected with a presenter through Dagger 2. And I'll open up one of the presenters. So the presenter, basically what it does is it has a whole bunch of these things called use cases, or you might call them, Robert Martin, Uncle Bob likes to call them interactors. And so basically how this works is, one thing which Uncle Bob mentioned is not to use dependency injection within the use cases, and I believe that's due to the fact that you don't really want any kind of, well, maybe that's not true because I have RxJava, but you don't really want a whole lot of framework stuff within the use cases. Anyways, what I do is for each of these use cases, when the presenter is first created, I pass in the whatever stuff it needs. So most of these use cases will need some kind of a repository. And of course, because I want my stuff decoupled properly, I don't pass in implementations, but rather I pass in interfaces. So alarm source is just like an abstraction of the Realm database that I use. So anyways, we create these use cases when the alarm presenter is first created so that they're ready to go. And then when, for example, the activity starts, we call the getReminders method. That method is going to call the getAlarmList use case. So, and we also use a composite disposable so that when when onStop is called, we clear the observables. So we call this use case, and I can't give you a huge explanation of RxJava if you're not familiar with it, but at the end of the day, how this basically works is, I think of it like on one end of the app we have the presenter, and on the other end of the app we have like the entities, the sort of the data stuff. And what's going to happen is we call the use case way out here, and then that message is going to sort of travel through to the other end, And then whatever happens in the database, whether it retrieves an item, returns nothing, or throws an error, it's going to kind of like pass that observable up back to the front. And the use case in the middle kind of partly acts, it's sort of like a relay, a layer of glue between the two of them. And it's also, for example, in some cases, I'll have to talk to multiple services with one sort of call. And so I kind of use the use case to sort of manage what goes on if we have sort of several different, come on brain, several different events or several different observables that I need to respond to. Anyways, kind of random digression, let's go into the use case itself. So if I go into get alarm list, it's really, really basic. So all it does is it implements this use case interface, which just gets given a type. In this case, it just returns sort of the raw data type that I would like to return, whatever I'm going to be wrapping in an observable. And then all we really do is we just sort of return it. We just say, in this case, run use case, and then we call the alarm source and we say, hey, alarm source, get alarms. That's basically that. And then if I go to alarm source is actually a database, and it's a realm database. And so all that happens here is we use the asynchronous RxJava method create, and we just return whatever. So for example, we would be calling get alarms. So it's just going to query the database, the realm database, for all of the active alarms, and I have a limit of 5, and return that as a list. I'm not in code mode. I really apologize about that. I keep doing that. Sorry about that. Let's just try that again really quickly. So presenter, I do that like once or twice an episode. So presenter contains use cases, uses RxJava, and it calls the use case. So getAlarmList.run use case, and it's going to listen for the result of that down here. And then it's going to pass that to the view or make a toast or whatever. And then in the use case, all it really does is it just gets created with an alarm source, which is actually secretly a database, but we keep it abstracted out. And it's just going to say, hey, data source, get me a use case. And then this is the actual implementation of the database, which is just a realm database, and it's just going to query for the list of alarms and either return it or throw an error using RxJava or whatever. So that's in a nutshell how I've implemented clean architecture so far. It is a bit of a work in process, but the thing that's really, really cool about clean architecture is that it's so separated. Like, you've got your front end stuff, you've got your domain, you've got your data layer. The dependencies sort of travel in one direction, so it's super easy to test. It's super easy to read, I find, because within these use cases, you're very explicitly saying, this use case is called getAlarmList. What does it do? It gets a list of alarms. And so for each, the last thing I'll kind of babble about with clean architecture is that when I design each of these presenters, all I needed to do is sort of ask the question, okay, what does this part of the app, what does this feature need to do? Well, it's going to need to get an alarm list, update or create an alarm, delete an alarm. I just ask those questions. I make a use case for each of those things, and then I just use RxJava to actually call the different methods. And so it becomes, to me, very legible, it has great separation of concerns, etc., etc. So I'm a huge fan of clean architecture, and whenever I can, I do build applications with it. Anyways, I'm just going to take a quick moment to catch my breath here, and we'll get on to a new question. So that is hopefully some interesting stuff about RxJava. Okay, So this is a somewhat an interesting thing. I wasn't really going to make an official announcement about this, but Renat asks, essentially, I'm just going to paraphrase a bit. Have I considered making a paid course on Android in Udemy? And so here's the thing. I have absolutely considered doing that. Basically, my main project right now is I'm actually writing an introductory ebook on Android. So that's going to sort of introduce people into what you need to know as far as Java, what you need to know with the basics of Android, how to sort of pick your projects, like a good starting project, a good second project to kind of take your knowledge a little further, an introduction to software architecture, because the thing about most tutorials, especially like the Udemy ones, is they don't really talk about software architecture, or at the very least, they only give you like 10% of the picture. Like, for example, Model View Presenter, the way that I was originally taught kind of poorly is that you can sort of make Model View Presenter as the entire app architecture, and you can do that, but actually Model View Presenter is more of a front-end architecture to me, as I've gotten further in my understanding of clean architecture. And what I mean by that is quite specifically, if I pull up this architecture diagram, Model View Presenter is like up here. So the view and the presenter are there. Some people sort of think of some people think of like the service layer or data layer or whatever you want to call it as the model. And I do kind of understand why, but I actually, I find that an incredibly confusing sort of definition, because the thing is, like, some people talk about model as in a whole layer of the application, and some people talk about model as in a data model or a POJO or an entity, which is also another confusing jargon term that's different in clean architecture and all this stuff. So anyways, I'm rambling like crazy here, but software architecture is, well, programming in general is people like to reuse the same words, and it's really confusing. So yeah, I have considered doing a course on Udemy. I'm going to do this ebook first and see how well that does, and I will quite likely eventually do a course on Android. So yeah, to answer your question there. So this is kind of a quick one. So the question is from Joshua. He looked at my profiler repository, unfortunately, because just for anyone listening, the profiler project is, what are we at here? That's the 9th month. It's like 6 months old, and it was sort of my first attempt at building a fairly, well, a larger scale application. And there's a lot of stuff that's not really up to date or proper, or stuff that I would suggest. And I have put that in the video, like it says deprecated. But the question, this is a totally valid question though. And the question is, so I can actually reference Pause Trainer when I answer this, but how do I handle stuff like navigation drawers and toolbars if I treat activities as, I'll just say, headless containers, essentially? And so what Joshua is curious about is, again, if I pull up Pause Trainer and I open up, let's just open up an activity. So I'll open up activity alarm list. And then I'll open up, actually, let's do alarm detail, because that one actually has a toolbar sort of thing. I'm not even sure why that's up there. That doesn't even make sense, but okay. So basically what I do, this thing isn't actually implemented as far as I'm aware. But essentially what I do is, so the question is like, okay, if you treat activities like containers, so there's no view stuff here, right? There's no toolbar, there's no navigation drawer. How would I handle things like navigation drawers sort of in the event that I have all of my view stuff in the fragment? And it's actually a really quick answer. I just move everything into the fragment. And what I mean by that is that there's no reason why you can't have a navigation drawer within the fragment. You can set up sort of like a navigator pattern to send the user to different activities. And anything you can do within the activities view hierarchy, you can offload that to the fragment. Like, I do that all the time. If I open up my room demo repository, hopefully I have the right version up here. Oops. For example, I kind of hinted at this, but if I open up fragment list and activity list, and this repository is open or is available down below, the activity is just a frame layout. Like, that's it. And then what I've done is I've just made essentially what is a fake, not a fake, but I've made sort of a view, a fragment level toolbar. So the thing, and a lot of times, like, if you get something that's sort of more complicated, the thing you have to understand is, like, yeah, you don't necessarily have to use the activity set toolbar kind of methods. Like, all you're really doing with a toolbar is you've got like a layout of a specific toolbar height, which is generally 56 dip, and then you've got image buttons in there, and you can set the what do you call it? You can set the animations, you can add in drawer layout, you can really do whatever you want within the fragment. So that is my personal approach. Not everyone does that, and I'm not saying you absolutely have to have every view thing in the view. I like to, because I like just absolute single responsibility principle in basically every part of my application. And if you're not sure what the single responsibility principle is, I have a video on my channel about that, and you can go check it out because it's a very powerful concept. It's like one part of the app is responsible for one thing, generally. Obviously, there are framework limitations and stuff. So, if you've enjoyed the show so far, please do me a favor and hit the like button below. I'm just going to run a quick commercial break, and we'll get to more questions. Oh, wow, lots of questions. Okay, this is a wonderful, really good question, and I like your name as well. I'll just type this out while the commercial's running. Oh, this is an interesting one. I'm going to copy your question word for word, and I will think very hard about this because you're asking me something which is something I have to be careful how I answer, because there are no easy answers here. Let me just increase the, let's see here, font. Let's go up to 26. There we go. All right, more coffee. Okay. This question is from Ryan Brown. I like your name, Ryan. I'm a Ryan as well. And the question is, so Ryan is 17 years old. He's finished his first app while he was supposed to study for school. I can kind of relate to that. And he wants to drop out of high school and study and develop apps 24/7. Do I think that's a good idea? Or do I think university will make me a better developer? So, the thing about this is my answer would change a lot depending on what kind of person you are, and I don't have a good idea about that other than the fact that you've managed to develop an app, and it appears that you're not very interested in probably the subjects within high school, and that's something I can relate to very well because I did well in high school, but it was actually one of the most boring experiences of my life. Because the thing in my case, and you can probably relate to this, is that I'm very stubborn and independent, and if someone can't explain to me why something is useful, I don't like to learn it. And for me, that's something that's been in my character from sort of day one, or from early school experiences. I'll give you one specific anecdote, is that I refused to learn handwriting, cursive writing, the whole wobbly crap, because no one, and I was pretty young, but I still expected this, no one could explain to me why that was better than printing. And on the other side of that, I was actually absolutely right about that. I understand if you're an artistic person and you like cursive writing and you have beautiful writing, I'm not dissing that. However, for me, I have zero desire to do that. Printing is more legible, so I refused to do it. And I was pretty young. Anyways, so here's the thing, Ryan. Here's what I would say to you. So, I don't know much about you, but you might be sort of at a stage where you're starting to realize that your teachers and potentially your parents, they might tell you, they might push you into university, they might say just get a degree, just do this, that kind of attitude, it'll all fall into place, and you might be sort of reaching an understanding that that is not necessarily true. School is not like post-secondary is not the only way to make a really good living, and B, not necessarily even the best route for you to take. Now here's the thing. As for high school, you're 17, so it sounds like you're really close to being done. I would not suggest you drop out of high school. I would suggest you finish high school. It shouldn't be very difficult for you. And listen, man, you're going to have to get used to doing a certain amount of stuff that you don't really want to do. And that is sort of a skill which is worth developing. So I wouldn't suggest you drop out of high school, man. As for post-secondary, I am a dropout. I'm not sure if you've learned much about me, but I have one semester of post-secondary. And one semester of post-secondary and burning through $4,000 of my money to be taught by someone who didn't really speak English very well and was not very good at teaching programming. I had one semester of that and realized, holy crap, this is not going to work for me. So that's the main thing. Now, there's no easy answers here, and there's there's one main thing I'd like to share with you. You've mentioned that you've already written an app and you have some, you are able to put effort to things in which you are interested in, and that is the most important thing. A lot of people, like a lot of my personal friends or people who are around me who are younger, not a lot, but a few people have asked me, and the main thing that I always say to people is, The big issue with doing your own thing, with setting your own goals and walking your own path, it is the most rewarding thing I've ever done, but it is also the most difficult thing I've ever done. I don't know what your situation is, but I don't come from a well-off family, and I have basically had to learn Android over the span of 3 years, actually 3.5 at this point, while working full-time to pay the rent. I did not have good mentors in the beginning. I still kind of don't. And to quote Jay-Z, I drove by the fork in the road and went straight. I did everything my way, and that's just my character. Is I want that, and I have a huge fucking ego. And over the span of 3.5 years, it has sort of started to fall into place for me through monumental effort. So what I'm trying to say here is that the thing about university is, listen, if you're already a pretty smart dude, and I think you are, university is going to be easier. I know a lot of guys who have gone to university, and after 1 year, they got picked up by a startup, and they, like a good friend of mine, did 1 year of university, went to a local startup, a successful one for a co-op. They hired him, and he makes like, I don't know what he makes, but he was like a 20-year-old kid making probably upwards of 50 grand a year. So university isn't a bad idea if you use it well. Really focus on co-ops if you do. Anyways, sorry, I kind of got sidetracked there. So here's the thing. University, I think of as a very safe path if you get into software engineering, because if you're good at what you do and you're a software engineer, you'll get work, absolutely, and you'll be paid well. I don't suggest university for a lot of other people that get into like sociology and different stuff, because you want to get a degree in something that gets paid well. However, if you are like me and you are stubborn as fuck and you're not going to be told by anyone, including your parents who you love and respect, what to do, then you probably won't be happy going to university. You will probably be running into more of what you ran into in high school, which is people telling you to learn things that you know you will not use. So do I think university is a good idea or a bad idea? There is no easy answer. That's the first thing. My suggestion to you would be to follow your instincts, but at the same time understand that if you choose to do your own thing, it's probably not going to happen. Success is probably not going to happen anywhere near as quickly as you think it will. And the ability to make yourself get up on time and get the work done is a very difficult skill to develop. And it's a constant struggle. So hopefully I've kind of answered that question for you. And most of all, man, I wish you luck, because the thing about it is, like I say, learning Android has been the most difficult thing I've ever done. Building my own business and walking my own path. It's the most difficult thing I've ever done. But at the same time, when a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, the kind of confidence you will have in yourself and the self-esteem you'll have in yourself through sort of building your own sort of empire, I can't even describe how amazing it is. It's worth monumental pain. So hopefully that answers your question, man, and good luck. If you get questions, come on back, and I'm happy to help you. Sorry, I know that was a really long answer, but That's a very important question, someone asking me something like that, and I'm not going to give a half-assed answer on a question like that. Again, don't drop out of high school. I wouldn't suggest that, but you know what? If you're like me, then you probably won't fucking listen to me anyway, so... Anyways. Let's see here. Lots of questions since my babble, so... Yeah, and here's the other... One last thing, Ryan. You're gonna hear a lot of people who will give you their opinions like, that's not a good idea. Those people don't know better than you. They're not necessarily wrong, but they're not right. There's no right and wrong here in this stuff. Either you walk your own path and you decide to commit to that pretty much 100%, and then you turn into eventually like a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk or all these different people who dropped out. But they're special people. They are abnormal people. Anyways, let's see here. Thank you, Renat. The ebook's coming along. Oh, okay, so this is a quick question. And no worries, I understand you perfectly well. Unfortunately, I'll probably butcher your name, and I do apologize that, but Sohail or Sohail has asked, so Sohail is it okay to use shared preferences as a database? Is essentially he or she, I'm assuming he, but Sohail used shared, is asking like, is it okay to use shared preferences as like the data source of a model view presenter application? And the thing about that, I would not suggest that. Well, it really depends on your use case. Like, I would have to ask, what data are you storing there? If you're storing anything sort of more complicated than like user preferences, you're going to want to learn how to use a database. I would strongly suggest that. Yeah, I almost kind of need more information on that, because I need to know what you are actually trying to store within shared preferences. But if you're storing lots of data, like for example, I'll just to give you one example. For example, if you were looking at my POS Trainer repo, which stores these things called alarms, where are they? An alarm is just like this crap here. If you're storing something like an alarm, and I only store 5 of these at a time, you're going to want to use a database for that. Now, maybe what you're running into is you might be seeing that to go from shared preferences to an actual database is actually a pretty daunting task at first. But the thing about it is, like, even if it takes you a couple weeks to build for the first time, you're still going to want to learn how to do that. Now, at the same time, let me walk you through Realm, because it's actually pretty easy to build. And I think once you see how easy it actually is, you'll probably be happier to use it. So let me walk you through my entire Realm implementation. So basically all I do is, some of you might not have seen this before, but as I mentioned before, there's actually a bigger container than the activity, which is the application class, which you can extend. You only want to extend the application class if you have a specific reason for it. So for example, if you're using Realm or Leak Canary or Dagger 2, you're going to want to extend it, but this is Realm. So within POS Trainer, you can check out the code down below. It's all open source, so you can play around with it all you want. Within pos trainer, I have this initialize realm method, and all we do in here is we just have 3 lines of code. We say realm.init, passing in application context. We use a realm configuration thing, blah, blah, blah. And then we set that as the default configuration. And then within the data source, which is, where the hell is it? Which is alarm database, all I say is realm.getDefaultInstance. As far as I'm aware, you don't actually want to use Dagger 2 with realm. You want to use this getDefaultInstance static method, but to be honest, realm might have changed a little bit since I last implemented this, but that's basically it. So realm default instance, and all I have to do is, like, for example, when, oh, and sorry, one last thing. So we initialize it in the application. This is all the code I need to execute it. And the thing that's cool about realm is that it does have, that might be a little bit more than you're ready to take on, but if you're not using RxJava, realm has asynchronous callbacks. So whenever you're talking to realm, whenever you're calling create, read, update, delete on realm, you want to use asynchronous callbacks. So your model, your presenter will talk to the model, which will probably be realm, asynchronously. Don't use synchronous calls. Or you can use RxJava, but I don't want to get too off topic here. So we've got that, and then we also need to create a realm model or realm class, which is just like a Pojo, except you annotate it with realm class and you give it a primary key. And then this is like the data model. So if you're used to SQL, this would be like the, I think you would call that the schema for the, what would you call that? SQL entity? I'm not sure. Anyways, it defines the structure of the data. I think it's a schema. But yeah, you create a model, which you would need to do anyway. And then when you're ready to, once you've created that, for example, to create a new alarm, where's new alarm here? Update alarm, which is also create one. You just say, you get your instance of realm, you call begin transaction, and then you just create a new, your new realm model. And then so I sort of pass in, where is that thing? Up here I pass in sort of an alarm object, which just contains all of the data necessary for a realm alarm. And then I kind of just convert it into this realm alarm object, because before you can store it and retrieve it in realm, it needs to be one of these, it needs to be like converted into a realm thing here. And then I just say realm copy to or update, commit. And so the point I'm trying to get at here is realm, for example, is super easy to work with as far as the database is concerned. There's a couple quirks that you need to get used to, this whole converting to and from realm objects. But like, yeah, shared preferences is a lot easier, but you're going to be a lot further ahead if you just kind of bite the bullet and learn how to use a database like this. You can also use Room Persistence Library that just came out by the Android team. It's a little more involved than Realm, I would say, but it's also a lot easier than the old solutions. Like, we used to have this, you'd have to set up an SQLite open helper, and then you had to just fiddle around with all this boilerplate nonsense, and it was really annoying. And then use async task or some other library to talk to it. And Room has really cut down on a lot of that boilerplate code. But if you're curious about Room as well, you can check out the Room demo repository, and it's pretty cool as well. Although it does use model view model, so it's slightly different in that regard. Anyways, I gotta catch my breath here. A quick question from Nikhil, and that question is, can I guide you to a video which explains RxJava in good detail? My suggestion would be to check out Jake Wharton. I'll just write that out in the notes thingy here. Good videos / explanations. I'm going to give you 2 resources that I really like. So number 1, YouTube, Jake Wharton, RxJava. Jake has a couple of talks on RxJava. Make sure you find the talks on RxJava 2 if you're learning RxJava 2. And he does really good talks. And Jake Wharton, he's basically like commonly regarded as one of the demigods of Android, and just an amazing developer. Also, this other resource which really helped me is by, if you've ever seen Fragmented podcast, I'll give a shout out to Kaushik. Hopefully I can spell his name. I always forget if it's AU or UA, but hopefully I've spelled that right. Kaushik Gopal. And let me just find, he has a really good write-up series on RxJava. Let me just pull it up here. And it's on his blog here. So I'll paste it here. You can just Google Kaushik Gopal RxJava 2. And Kaushik runs, or is one of the co-hosts of the Fragmented podcast, which is a super amazing podcast. If you're an Android developer, you should watch Fragmented. Don and Kaushik are really good developers. I'll also paste that in the comments, but Kaushik has a blog series sort of explaining the current state of RxJava. Because the thing about RxJava 2 and 1 and all that is, just in the comment section, I've given the link there. The thing about RxJava, which is frustrating, is that you have, you're going to run into resources for RxJava 1, and also RxJava 2 changed a fair amount. So you're going to want to try and find stuff either 2016 or more recent, because a lot of old, like for example, in RxJava 1, the create method was like this garbage thing that you really didn't ever want to use, whereas in RxJava 2, the observable.create method is really handy. You can kind of just slap asynchronous code in there and use it almost similar to an async task, except better. Anyways, hopefully that answers your question quickly. What else have we got here? A lot of great questions today. Oh, Joshua, do me a favor, send me a YouTube message with your email, and I will send you an invite to Slack. I think you're the guy who posted on one of my videos, and I really apologize if I was disrespectful to you at all. I was in a bad mood that day, and I kind of got a little bit angry because he told me to make shorter videos, and I think we're cool now, bro, but I do apologize. I didn't mean to be that angry with you. Oh, yeah. All right, what else have we got here? Sorry, there's so many questions. I'm having trouble finding my place here. So that's RxJava. Yeah, basically, yeah, I've explained all that. Oh, okay, so this is, again, this is a quick question here. This is by Nikhil. So the thing is, Nikhil, my profiler project and my pos trainer project, those are like old projects which were my first attempts at building apps live on camera, and I was not so good of a developer. I was pretty good, but I wouldn't actually suggest those as learning resources anymore. Now, my POS Trainer repository is now up to date. I wouldn't suggest watching most of the old videos. There are a couple where I do test-driven development stuff, but POS Trainer in particular, it's not a step-by-step video. I did put it in a playlist just to group it all together, but it's changed a lot since I made most of those videos, so hopefully that clarifies things a bit. My more recent stuff, especially like starting with the RecyclerView 2017 tutorial, that's a lot better structured and more accurate. So to be honest, like I will probably eventually just take down the profiler videos. It's just a lot of people watch them and there is some good information. So that's kind of my answer there. What else have we got? You're welcome, Ryan. I'm glad my answer was helpful for you. And like the things that you're saying here, I totally relate to. Like you're saying, other than like math and physics, a lot of history and religion and geography is just weeks of wasted time on stuff you're not particularly interested in. And I can totally relate to that. But on the other side of things, being able to focus and learn how to focus on things which aren't that interesting is a bit of a skill in itself. And honestly, man, like you are still 17, and you probably hear this a lot, but like don't burn the boats too quickly. Like you're real close there, and I hear all of what you're saying, and yeah, but and also, like you're saying, you know, you'll probably have to catch up a lot with Android because you'll have wasted a bunch of time in high school. But the thing about that is maybe take this time to, like, if you can learn Android while going to high school, that's going to be a similar situation to working and learning Android on the side, which is what I did. Now, you might not have to work, which would be ideal for you, but just, you know, sharing some thoughts. Well, so this is sort of along the same lines, but what's your name here? M. Shiv asks, can you be successful as an Android developer? Let's see, as a college dropout. So here's the thing. Here's my answer to that, and it's actually going to be pretty quick. And so the reason that I actually got into Java programming, which I did have a bit of experience with Java before I got to Android, is because a good friend of mine and another acquaintance of mine were college dropouts who got really good jobs as developers. And so now the thing about that is you have to understand that I live in Victoria, Canada, and if you're from a country which really values degrees, so I'm thinking, if I'm not mistaken, forgive me if I'm wrong, but places like South Korea or Japan or lots of Asia, they really value the piece of paper. Whereas where I'm from in North America, it's more about what can you do. And the thing is, you absolutely can be successful as a college dropout. The thing is, you are going to need to have lots of really good code in repositories. You're going to have to be able to show what you can do in code. Now, the cool thing about that is, as a lot of employers will tell you, there's a lot of people out there who have even master's degrees who fucking suck at actually building software. Like, they could talk circles around me when it comes to all this jargon and computer science and stuff. And, you know, they could maybe regurgitate definitions, but there's a big difference between giving like a memorized definition of model view presenter and actually being able to build model view presenter within the context of the Android platform. And that's what I'm good at, is actually building this stuff. So you absolutely can be successful and get a job as an Android developer as a college dropout. Like the last job interview I went to, I actually ended up turning down the job because I thought I'd be, well, I won't get into that, but you can get hired and be successful without a degree. The thing is, if you take that path, you need to be really good at what you do. You can't get away with, unless you're really lucky, with kind of half-assing things, and you need to make up for the lack of degree with really good code, really legible code, good quality, good separation of concerns, good architecture. You have to demonstrate to the employer that you are a very good programmer and you have a lot of value, and that value needs to outweigh the piece of paper, essentially. All right, I'm only going to answer one more question. So let's see what we got here. And by the way, if you haven't already, hit the like button down below. If you've enjoyed the show, please hit the like button down below if you haven't already. And I'm just going to run one more commercial break, and then we'll get to the last question because my voice is starting to get really hoarse. Okay. Vipin asks where I am from. I'm from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Let's see. Interesting. Okay, let's see if we can get one more question here. Just so really quickly, Sohail is asking, would I recommend Realm or Room? To be honest, they're both really good. To give you an idea, I actually asked this question in the Why Is Asked Slack group this morning, which was what does everyone prefer? Because I've built Realm databases and I've built Room databases, and they're both really good. Like maybe the only thing I would say is that like I would probably prefer Realm with model view presenter databases, architectures, and maybe Room for model view model, just because Room plays really nicely with live data, but you can also use observables. So you know what? They're both really good. I do not have an easy answer there for you. I mean, honestly, if you're used to working in Room already, you could probably just stick with it. If you're interested in learning Realm, go do that. Let's do one more kind of question here. Rohit asks if I think Java is going to replace, Kotlin is going to replace Java for Android development. I actually have a video on my channel you can check out for that. I won't go over that again, but longer story short, it's too early to tell. Ask me again in 2 to 5 years. However, I think there's a lot of value in learning Kotlin. All right, so this is the last question I will answer. And again, it's probably not going to be a very... I'll just share my thoughts with this, on this topic. So Asanka asks, So he's got a job offer as an application support engineer in a really good company with a really good salary, but he likes Android development, and he would like to hear my suggestions on what he should do here. I'm assuming he. I'm not the best with Indian names, but I believe that. Please forgive me if I'm wrong. So what you basically, like, the question here is like, so you've got a situation where you've probably got a fairly cushy, well-paid job, but you've also, it's probably not exactly what you want to do, whereas you really like Android and that's what you like to do. Again, like, I don't, as I'm sure you are aware as well, in situations like this, I really like the sort of cliche saying that there's no such thing as a right decision, or what was it? There's no such thing as correct decisions, there's only smart decisions. As in, there's no easy answer here. If you're in a situation like me, I would probably take the job for like a year or so, depending on what the contract states. Build up like a decent bank account first, and then kind of branch off into your own thing. But also, if money's not too much of an issue and you know, a job offer pops up and Android is what you really want to do, that's a totally valid approach too. The only two things I would personally look at is not going with this application support job going to drastically affect your livelihood versus your happiness, your personal fulfillment. And I think that depends. Like, some people, for example, I have a very good friend of mine who is probably in a similar location on the autism spectrum as me. And it's funny because, like, his sort of goal in life is to have a job that pays well, but he doesn't care if it's fulfilling. He just wants money so that he can do the other things he enjoys in life. Whereas I take the perspective of, I'm going to be spending hours and hours and hours at this job, so it better be something I like doing. So I don't think either way is right, because there's no right answers here. But what I would suggest is, if you're like me, if you don't like doing things, you really don't like doing things that you don't want to do, probably you should go the Android development route. Whereas if you're, you know, if you've got a family, if you've got people to support, take the safer option, take the good job. Like, you know, that's basically my thoughts on that. So thank you everyone for watching. Hopefully I answered hopefully I gave people some decent insight on that. And thank you so much for watching. We will be back next Sunday for another Q&A. However, every 10th episode, I basically do an off-topic Q&A. So I pretty much answer whatever. So I got a couple of questions which were more general and sort of my opinion on career paths and choices and things like that. And if you've got questions like that, that's a great time to ask it on the next live stream, which will of course be Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time, which is GMT -7. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was as fun for you as it was for me, and we'll see you later. Peace out.